When calculating profitability, specialty crop farmers must rely on their own methods of tracking cost, time, and sales. It's important for producers to first truly understand what they need to be recording, common mistakes when calculating profitability, and resources available to help. Today, we're learning more about the Grow Your Own Green Farm Profitability Resources by the Minnesota Farmers Market Association. I'm your host, Morgan Hughes, and South Dakota Specialty Producers Association is made up of growers, consumers, and others interested in producing, marketing, and supporting South Dakota specialty crops, meats, and locally made products. This podcast is made possible through a specialty crop block grant SDSPA received through the South Dakota Department of Ag and Natural Resources. This season, our podcast, Fresh Bites, is talking about how South Dakota specialty crop producers can measure and increase their market garden profits. So thank you to Kathy for joining us today. And I'm going to start by having you introduce yourself and share about what the Minnesota Farmers Market Association is.
Well, thanks, Morgan, for having me. I'm Kathy Zeman. I own Simple Harvest Farm Organics in Rice County in Minnesota. And that's actually how I started my adventure with the Minnesota Farmers Market Association as a direct marketing farmer of meats and eggs and goat milk soap. I was selling at farmers markets and kept running into inconsistent interpretations of food laws. It didn't make sense to me that the rules changed every 10 miles to the next farmer's market, which they didn't, by the way, but none of us understood them. And so when the board at that time, back in 2012, put out an email that just said, "Hey, we need somebody to run an organization from home. Who wants to do that?" And so I said, "Well, pick me, but but only pick me if we're all willing to lean in and do some public policy and kind of dig into why the different rules look like they do and how we can, and if we need to change laws, we should do that. And if we don't need to change laws, but we just need to know what they are, then we'll need to develop our own education." And so that's how I ended up with the Minnesota Farmers Market Association. And of course, in former careers, I'm a former extension educator with the University of Minnesota Extension. I have a farm business management. I'm certified in instructional systems design. So leaning into this educational part and trying to make us all profitable in this wonderful world called direct marketing farmers, where we get to set our prices. That's why I love what I get to do, right? I get to work at it and try out the things on my own farm and in my own records, and yet then get to help all of our other farmers sell and try to be profitable throughout the entire state.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing some of your knowledge and experience in this podcast episode. So, jumping into farm profitability, what are some key considerations to calculating profitability and determining a profit margin?
So, both of those, calculating profitability and determining your profit margin, are really further down the road. When we start with all of our beginning farmers, so one of our farmers stood up and wrote a big WSD on the board. And we're like, "What does that mean?" And they're like, "It really is as simple as just writing stuff down." And we're like, "Yes, that's exactly right. You have to learn to write down all of your expenses and all of your income." And in the direct marketing world, so much of what we do is cash. And now, because I'm old, so all the young kids, right, they're all doing Cash App and Venmo and all of these apps where for me, it would be more awkward and challenging to capture that income and expenses going out, but they're really good at it. So it is that ability, though, to begin to capture that. So beginning January 1, we sit down and we do balance sheets. And sometimes it's as easy as making farmers walk around their farm or walk through their pack shed or wherever they're at and stumble into the next thing. We had one farmer that she thought she only had like $3,000 worth of assets for her current assets. By the time she got done walking around that room, we were over $10,000. Well, that's a pretty big jump, right? So to get to profitability and to that profit margin, you really have to be disciplined in writing things down. That's why we do our open office hours every month. Like every month, our farmers, they have to prove to us and ourselves that we have to have written down all of our expenses that month and then all of our income. Because if you wait 6 months, or heaven forbid, you wait until December to write everything down, you forget. You just lost so much data. So the key here is to be disciplined. And where it's hard for me, so I always apologize to my farmers. August is a month that I do really poorly writing anything down. It's just the tough month for me. Other farmers have different months. August, I don't do very well. And like literally my box that has all of my receipts is falling off the wall practically. It's so heavy because I haven't been able to process anything. But so before we can get to that profitability, you've got to write it. And then we teach them to divorce your emotions. Like, don't worry about if you're losing money or making a lot of money at that point. You just need to write things down because if you begin to attach emotions to things, then you're going to say, oh, we just shouldn't write that down. It's going to show that I lost a little bit of money. No, just get them down, write them down. Then we have good information to make a decision whether you should continue with that or not continue. But the key really is to capture all of your expenses and all of your income on a consistent monthly basis and get them into whatever tool you want, whether it's Quicken or QuickBooks or Ambrook or I don't care. Ryan, one of our core team, he created in Excel this farm ledger. It is just brilliant. It's just Excel. Just get it in there. And then we sort into all the different chart of accounts and Schedule Fs. And then with a couple of clicks, one of our farmers actually said, oh, if you just did this, you can come up with your profit and loss statement within a couple more clicks. So the key is really the important thing is to, on a very disciplined, regular basis, you have to record everything somewhere.
That seems to be a common theme between these episodes. Uh, and it's so important. And so I'm curious from your perspective, why is tracking all of these metrics and writing those things down to calculate your farm profitability so important?
Also because you have to, the first year that you're farming, it's going to feel chaotic because it probably is, right? Because you're just ramping up. Nobody hits 100% efficiency in that first year. So if your first year, you're just writing things down. At the end of the year is when you get to do your profitability analysis, both whole farm and then by your enterprises. And so for me, an enterprise would be I need to make sure that my goats and my sheep and my pigs and my turkeys, right, and my eggs. But for straight up produce farmers, they might want to say, oh, I wonder did my tomatoes do better than my kohlrabi or whatever that they're trying to figure out, right? And just remember also your financial records are only part of it. You have to get those down so we know what those dollar figures are. But then you have to marry those up or merge those up with your production records, because then we have to know. We have a couple of our more experienced farmers, like every year they take one crop and they do a deep dive analysis into that crop. And they measure how much time did it take to order the seed, to put the seed in the seeder, to seed, to transplant, and then to weed them and water, and then harvest and sell. They track one of them, and they have found out over the years. So again, your first year is pretty chaotic, where the beauty of this comes in is after a few years, you get to see some trends. But they have been able to prove to themselves that sometimes a crop they thought they were losing money on, no, they actually made a bunch of money. And a couple of crops that they were sure they were making money on, they did not. So, it's the balance of your financial records are important, but then you also have to keep on the, some really good production records.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about breaking it down by crop, not just
Yeah.
as a whole. Um, when farmers are working to set their prices and figure out their profitability, aside from writing everything down, what do you think is overlooked or a mistake that specialty crop producers are commonly making?
I checked in with Ryan Pesh. He's our University of Minnesota Extension Farm Business Management Specialist. And I checked in with Eric Highmark. He is our Renewing the Countryside Farm Business Management Specialist. So we have two pretty experienced FBM folks in specialty crops. That is they both run really good produce farms. And they do both wholesale and retail. And they both weighed in that, especially for new operators, that there's a tendency for them to have their prices outside of the range for typical products. Sometimes they come in way too high and then they price themselves out of the market. Other times they come in way too low and they don't even know they're too low because they haven't been keeping good records. So they don't know that they're below the price, the cost of their production. And if they're too low, they're irritating all of their other fellow produce farmers because you're dragging everybody down. Nobody wins, right? When we all are racing to the bottom, we all will do better when we are all in it together and we are setting not price gouging, but definitely we need to make money if we're going to be in this for the long haul. So the reason that's why, on another project that we are working on is to capture prices at farmers markets. We need the retail prices coming through at a farmer's market because we know we can capture some wholesale prices a little bit easier. But we're creating that database of market prices for all of these specialty crops across the state, from Canada to Iowa to South and North Dakota to Wisconsin, right? All the different places capturing those so that our produce farmers they know what the range is, so that they won't get too low and they won't get too high. Once we have that, then we get to the next level where we say, sometimes they'll learn how to do blend pricing. It means that Ryan says that if he never makes any money on his green scallions. If he brings green scallions to the farmer's market, doesn't make any money. But if he doesn't bring them, he gets yelled at and people will walk away from his booth. So he has learned the scallions, he may have to price a little bit lower to get them to move. But then other crops that people are willing to spend a little bit more on, he will raise that a little bit so that the blend price of these 2 or 3 crops end up with a whole farm profitability. That's where we think that a common mistake is made, that especially in the beginning, people they first of all don't know their cost of doing production, but then their prices are probably a little bit out of whack. And then once you do it for a few years, you'll get better at figuring out where your top is and where your floor is.
And for producers that might be listening to this that are looking for South Dakota specific resources, on our economics webpage, you can find data for our price sharing from 2024 and 2023, and that is broken down for specialty crop pricing by early, mid, and late season, as well as by the crop and the unit in which they're sold. And it provides price ranges as well as an average price. So thinking about prices and kind of how you were talking about that blend price and making sure that all of your crops can kind of even out to make sure you're profitable, farmers markets seem to have a bigger level of uncertainty than other specialty crop markets. It's not like a CSA where you're selling a set number of shares every week. You are really needing to think about things like weather or market attendance, and how should specialty crop producers be considering those things as they are calculating their prices and their profit margin?
I think what we've learned, Morgan, over time is that most of our markets have fair weather customers and they have die-hard customers. So that even on bad weather days, those die-hard customers are going to show up. So maybe on a typical day, you sell $1,000 worth of produce. But on a really, not so nice weather day, you may only sell $500 or $600. Over time, you will learn how to balance that out a little bit. We also stress that COVID certainly reinforced this, that you don't want to put all of as an egg farmer, I love saying this, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, right? So you don't want to have just farmers market. You don't want to have just CSA. You don't want to just sell to restaurants. because when if you only have one sales channel and that goes down, you are done, right? Then you might as well be selling commodities, because that is all just controlled by one sales channel. So even though you're selling at farmers market, so because that will be one of your sales channels. If you have a bad day there, you will just have more produce to sell into your other sales channels. It could be a restaurant, it could be a grocery store, it could be schools. So we really recommend that we've been saying this forever and ever. COVID really hit us over the head with it. Have multiple sales channels, so you always have an exit. And then even for me with my meat and my eggs, when I bring in pullets, those little when a pullet lays their eggs are small in the beginning. So those are the eggs that I get to donate to my food shelf. So even when you have bad weather days at a farmer's market, hopefully there's always that off ramp, right, for some of that produce, because it's very perishable, that you could then donate that little bit to your food shelf at that time. So that's it. I mean, I actually consider food shelves, helping feed everybody in our community, as one of my sales channels when it fits my production.
Interesting. So that's like donating to the food
Yeah.
bank or pantry?
Right. So in Minnesota, well, there was the federal LFPA, the local food purchasing agreement, that of course the current administration has reneged on that responsibility. But in Minnesota, we just did come in, and we're funding some of that now with Minnesota money. So again, that money we would be buying from our produce farmers, that would go then to our food shelves. And so some of that could be paid for now with LFPA money, whether it's federal dollars or state dollars. In Minnesota, it would be state dollars. But even for me, I mean, my farm needs to donate. And so that is how I look at that as part of my marketing mix. And I can make sure that I'm doing that. And that's what we would call a marketing mix, the different sales channels. So you kind of always know, in case you have a bad farmer's market day, where you could go with those perishable products.
I just was unfamiliar with the term food shelves, so I was just clarifying that I
Okay,
understood
yeah,
correctly.
sorry. Yeah.
No, that's okay. So now that we've talked a little bit about profitability and those considerations, I want to jump into the Grow Your Green farm profitability resources. Can you share more about what this project is and what its elements are?
Absolutely. This all started back in 2021 when the new micro farm revenue insurance plan came out. And of course, me being old, I was somewhat skeptical that it would actually work. So we said, hey, let's write a grant. We'll test this. We'll test to see if this insurance because they said it will finally work. Finally, our produce farmers would have some kind of an insurance program. Well, and so we got money to do this, and we found out that yes, it may work, but that program is set up that a beginning produce farmer can't even buy it until they're prohibited from buying it until they have survived on their own for 3 full years, because it mandates 3 Schedule Fs. So, I mean, which was insane to me. Like, that is not a safety net. That is not fair, and it is not equitable. So we threw that out the door, and we said, oh, and then we got another grant that we could, in Minnesota, we had Minnesota money that we would be able to pay 65% of anybody's premium in that micro farm program. Well, we only had 7 people in the state of Minnesota that bought it. In the nation that year, there was only 92 policies sold, because no beginning farmer could buy it. You had to survive on your own until your 4th year of farming. So then we said, the real problem here, we do not have enough of our emerging farmers with Schedule Fs. And that's how Grow Your Green was started. We needed to be able to start locking in Schedule F so that they could finally even apply to them. Yes, we have escalated the issue to USDA and all of our federal delegation. Minnesota has 4 federal delegation on ag committees at the federal level. They know that we are a little annoyed that our produce farmers can't buy this until they've survived on their own for 4 years. But in the meantime, we are helping people get their Schedule Fs. So We piloted the Grow Your Green farm profitability in March of 2024, and we just said, emerging farmers, get to get to Brainerd. It was a tough year, and so the winter was a weird winter, so the Cragans and Brainerd was happy to give us their resort, and we locked people in for 2 days, 3 days. We were there for 3 days, and we took them through our first iteration of Grow Your Green. And then we've got this other NRCS grant now. And so we tested our material in a presentation mode, and we had to do it in multiple languages as well. So English, but also Spanish and Somali and other languages. And then we flipped that in our current grant, we flipped that into a workbook. So now we have all of our material is in a workbook. The current workbook is right now only in English. We're working on getting that into other languages. But the workbook is set up. Here is this knowledge you need to learn, and then here's an activity that you can test whether you learned it or not. And Ryan keeps making us stay. Ryan keeps making us stay. Don't get too fancy, Kathy. Let's keep it pretty. Like, we want to stay to the basics. Eric Highmark and I are like, oh yeah, but then let's chase down these other new formulas, because that's where all the fun is. Like, that's really where the fun is, when you get to do your enterprise analysis. So it's a nice balance between get the basics down into, okay, let's go have fun with the percentages and the ratios. So the workbook is done, and anybody across the nation, we've got people coming in from Detroit, we've got people coming in from Washington State. Anybody can download that workbook for free. And then, because that workbook is there, and then we created the Excel, there's an Excel spreadsheet that Ryan created, Ryan Pesh, Extension, Minnesota. It is the farm ledger, and you can just type it in, all of your expenses, all of your income, all your expenses then get automatically put into your chart of accounts and into the Schedule F categories, so that at the end of the year, we can quickly it all sums it up, and we can come up with our totals. And he did that as a farm ledger. We have, there's many different options for balance sheets. We have an Excel balance sheet out there, so we can help anybody do a balance sheet. We have a cash flow statement that they can plug and play. So everybody can download this and make their own copies. And then, so now we've got all of the tools there, right? That are all free, and they're there forever. When the grant's done, we'll still have them. It's not like this is going to change a lot. And so then we said, okay, then we know that people have questions. So we have set up the first Tuesday of every month from 9:30 to 11:30, the Tuesday morning. And the first Wednesday evening of every month from 6 to 8, we have open office hours. And that means that our core team, it is Delma Kaga. She is a tax advisor from the Bloomington area and a produce farmer. Heidi Egger, who is from Radical Heart Farm in Southeast Minnesota. She's a livestock farmer. You've got me, a livestock farmer, and you've got Eric Highmark, who is our Maple Ridge Produce, and he's also the farm business management specialist with Renewing the Countryside. We are there. And if nobody calls in, we're okay with that, because at least our core team can get work done, because we will have people calling us during the week, during the month, and it gives us time to talk to each other and try to figure out, like, what would we give advice to this farmer, or where do you think this kind of expense or income should be categorized? So that's really it in a big, and once thank goodness for NRCS and the grant that they gave us. Our grant, we worked with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture's Emerging Farmers Office. That's really the anchor for us on this grant. And then Minnesota Growin' is our promotional program in Minnesota. So if it's a Minnesota product, they help us advertise and market them. And then MFMA came in with all of the farmers market and our Grow Your Green farm profitability. So thank goodness for this grant, because we know that the grant helped us develop the material. The material is not going to change substantially over time. And so we will be able to continue this way for decades after the grant is done. Because if I can make myself sit at in my office once a month for 4 hours, 2 hours Tuesday morning and 2 hours Wednesday evening, I will catch up on work, right? My computer work. And then anybody can call in. So we're pretty happy with the system right now. So far, we haven't stumbled. Of course, we're only a few months in. We haven't yet stumbled on anything, that we couldn't answer, we couldn't help people figure out their resources. we think that at the end of the year, Morgan, we may have to do more in person when you start digging into people's records and you're trying to figure out, is everything categorized right? And how are we going to get to that enterprise analysis? And then help them also during the year make sure their production records, right, are in order. Like if they only sold $200 worth of tomatoes and they really thought they were going to sell 2,000, what happened? Like what, did something happen in the field, right? I mean, so that's where those financial records and the production records kind of merge up together. That we think is going to take a little bit more time than we probably have, figured out or put in the grant, but we'll figure that out when we get there. But so far, we're pretty happy about, the program and the success and the progress we're making.
Wonderful. It always seems to take a little bit more time, but it's wonderful that you're getting questions and able to help producers in that way. In terms of how people can use these different resources, can you speak to how the tools can serve different producers differently, either established producers looking to increase profitability or new farmers that might be just getting started?
I think that Morgan, that's the fun part of our core team that we've got really deep experience with both Ryan and Eric with farm business management. And then Heidi and Delma and I are not quite as experienced, but Heidi and I certainly bring in the livestock perspective. And then Delma's there with her tax preparation, her tax advisor knowledge. So we've been able to handle those questions that have been the basics, like is this taxable, is this a tax expense, like which of the Schedule F categories we put it in, and then helping them come up with the chart of accounts. We know that there are some of our farmers that just want big picture categories, and we'll talk them through how, well, if you broke those, and our workbook gets to that. If you would break your category down to 2 or 3 more levels, it'll give you more information, right? Because so one of the ones that Ryan says is, you could say these are just my farmers market sales. But what if you go to 3 different farmers markets? Wouldn't you like to know if one of them just isn't making any money? So then you'd want to say farmers market A, farmers market B, farmers market C. And sure, your category list gets longer, but once it's in there, it it pre-fills, so it's pretty easy to do. So that is pretty critical. Then there's that other caution, like Ryan would probably yell at me, I have way too much detail in mine. But I'm like, oh, I know, but if I break it into all these categories, I might use that information at some point. So the tools are built so that you can help the people that really are okay having high level, and then the people that are crazy and want all the details spelled out. So that's a nice part of it. And then because of their experience of Ryan and Eric, so one of the questions came up, like when should you borrow money? If you're in a position that you need to expand, how do you know? And I was talking to Eric. I'm like, I can hear my dad's voice in my head all the time, like, don't borrow money. And so I've always wanted to self-finance. I'm like, wouldn't it be fun if there would be a formula that would say, this is when you really should borrow money. It pays to borrow money. And Eric says, there is one. Okay, great. So all of these formulas are out there. And so we're going to actually kick off a second workbook. So the first workbook will be, this is your basic, get your basics done, so that we can have all of that basic information. But then the workbook 2 will be able to go into more detail in all of those profit margin and when should you borrow money or when shouldn't you, and those anyway. So we're going to have both the basic and then more extended, because we've got several of our beginning farmers are financial wizards. I mean, and they've had an off-farm income and they're financial gurus. But now to apply that to farming, now they're bringing up questions that this second workbook and the second set of formulas will help. So that's been kind of fun. So yeah, I think and because we've got both produce and livestock, and then both experienced and beginning farmers, we've been able to hit a lot of the issues and then try to solve them.
That's great. It really can apply to anyone. Uh, how have farmers and producers responded to the program so far?
Initially, everybody is really excited. And then it gets boring, right? I mean, in the, I mean, not for me. I like numbers, but it is kind of boring to have to, take receipts or remember where they are. The first time that we did this, we gave every single farmer a plastic envelope that we told them to go put this in their vehicle so that when they would drive through the Quick Trip or wherever you get gas, you'd put that receipt in that plastic envelope. And then once a month, when we Zoom with them, because we Zoom or Google Meet with all of our farmers. Oh, yeah. So we've got this year in our Grow Your Green, we brought in 20 farmer trainers, put them up for 2 or 3 days in a hotel. And then we met at the farm at the ARB at the University of Minnesota, and they went through intensive training. And then each of those 20 farmers that are now farmer trainers, they had to go find 5 more farmers, and they are training those farmers. So we're doing the train the trainer model, right? And so everybody's kind of learning as we go. So a lot of those farmer trainers have learned from their farmers, but they're all learning together that it is that discipline of writing it down once a month that eventually kind of drags down your enthusiasm. But that's why, so those the 20 farmer trainers have to meet every month with their 5 farmers. Some are doing it one-on-one, some are doing it all together, but they're either through Zoom or Google Meet. But that we make them show us, like we have to be able to look at, we do a screen share, and we need to see, do they have, so if it's in June, do they have entries for May? If it's in July, do they have entries for June? And then we help them figure that part out. And then just by us asking questions, like, really, you didn't put any gas in your vehicle? Oh, yeah, we did. Okay, go get that to go get that. And sometimes not all of our farmers have computers. A lot of them are doing their finances on their phone. Those folks are talented. I don't think I could do that. I'm old. But they're doing it all on their phone. So we figure out how to bring that information in from a phone and get it into some kind of a record. And we tell them you could do it all paper and pencil. And we've got a few farmers that are doing it all paper and pencil. At the end of the year, one of us is going to get all of that into an Excel spreadsheet, right? Or some kind of electronic, because how else do you get to do all of your analysis? But we will meet farmers where they are at. If they do it paper and pencil, we can do that. That's fine. We've got a bunch of Amish farmers that do paper and pencil. That is fine. We can still figure out your profitability. And if you're the whiz kid on the block that has all the techie stuff, somebody in our team will be able to help them. Probably not me, but somebody in our team will help them. But it really doesn't matter. We want them to be profitable. They love what they do, right? Farmers love what they do. They love to grow good food. So we just want to make sure that they're profitable so they can continue to do it, for a long time. Okay.
Absolutely. And I'm going to have the link to your website in the
Okay.
caption of this podcast episode. But for anyone else who wants to learn more in addition to that website or about your programs or the Minnesota Farmers Market Association, do you have social media or a newsletter or anything else where they can find out more?
Yes. So we are mfma.org. M as in Minnesota, farmers, F as in farmers, M as in market, A as in association.org. So at mfma.org is our handle on Instagram and Facebook. And I think that's it. And then our website is mfma.org. And then everything on there just kind of flows. We've got our 4 big things on our homepage, and then tend to offer all of our educational material for free, because if we really need people to know this to succeed, then we have to be able to do it for free. So we write grants, or we figure out how to leverage our partners and figure it out. Because if we have to charge for too many things, it means only the people who have money are going to be able to access it. And there are times that we need our people to know this to stay legal, right? To be profitable. So we'll do our best to continue to offer it for free so that we can meet people where they're at and help them succeed and feed their communities.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you, Kathy, for visiting today and for sharing about the project and what the Minnesota Farmers Market Association is. And thank you to our listeners for tuning into today's podcast episode. And again, the link to these resources will be in the caption of this episode.